So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Jeremy Waite, no less.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Old friend. Hello.
Hello indeed.
How are you?
Very well.
And now works for Salesforce and has come to talk to me about his book that is coming up. But first of all, tell us a little bit about you, Jeremy. Your background.
Jeremy Waite, official title, Head of Digital Strategy for EMEA, for the Marketing Cloud. I get to be the evangelist at Salesforce across Europe, travelling around, saying nice things about the company and what we do and why we do it.
Super.
Started off working for my dad's print company, ended up trying to have my own agency, went bankrupt, didn't work out, wanted to be the entrepreneur, then decided that wasn't for me, kind of went to apply to a lot of jobs, couldn't get a job because they say that you can't employ, entrepreneurial people, because either you're going to leave until you've got your idea, or you're going to get back on your feet and you're going to bounce, or you're overqualified. So I remember...
Well, this don't fit.
Yeah, this was like 8 years ago. I think I applied for 65 jobs and didn't get one interview. Anyway, I ended up doing some consulting, which gave me enough space to go and write a book. So I wrote Sex, Brands and Rock and Roll for a bit of fun. And that opened up enough doors that got me in as head of social at Phones for You. Did some great stuff there. Ended up working with TBG, that was Facebook's biggest ad agency. They said, come and do what you did at Phones for You for some of our brands, which was a huge amount of fun. Adobe said, can you come and do that for us, when I was launching the Marketing Cloud and working with those guys. And there were some acquisitions, and that was a whole lot of fun. And then eventually landed at Salesforce just over a year ago. I actually tried to join here 3 years ago. So it's kind of happy how I ended up where I wanted to be. And it's nice, because I joined for Mike Benioff. I joined for the vision, and I like what the company stands for. So good people, good company.
And so the book, is that part of that, or is it separate to that, or is it kind of like complementary to that, or is it kind of like... you're kind of it's in your slipstream, or it's like in tandem, or how does it work?
So I'm a little bit like you, that I just love the creative process of writing stuff and creating it. I love the adventures that it takes you on when you try and articulate what it is that you love, And certainly with part of my job, I have to try and explain big things in a very short amount of time in a boardroom. But I get to see a lot of interesting stories, and I get to see a lot of brands that are doing things wrong, especially where social media's come from. So historically, I've blogged quite a bit, I've been on Twitter, I pick up all of these stories, and I read a huge amount. I read a lot of books every week. So I just thought it'd be a really nice thing just to put all of these things together in some kind of document. Didn't know what it was going to look like, started about 2 years ago, and I started to see this common thread that seemed to tie together all the brands that I really liked, and then the brands that were struggling. They all seemed to go on a similar sort of journey. So what really started off a little bit like Godin, we both love Godin, and I like the way that he amalgamates a lot of his blog posts, dumps them in a book, and then sends them out into the world to see what happens. That's essentially what I was trying to do. What's ended up happening is it's a lot of the posts that I've written was going to be 200 pages. It ended up being 400 pages because there's a theme that ties them all together that kind of work through in the book. Yeah, okay. So a happy accident, really.
And so it's called From Survival to Significance.
Yes.
Give me the headlines. What are the takeaways? I mean, obviously not wanting to kind of like stop people or reduce any incentive for people to go out and buy the book when it actually kind of comes out.
Sure.
But give me the headlines. What would it say if you had, which you don't actually have, but if you had a proper back cover on it?
Yep.
I've got it in my hands here. He's got a quote or something, or maybe that is the kind of the back cover.
That is the back cover.
Right. So tell me what that means.
So what you stand for is more important than what you sell. The basic premise of the book is that it's not enough to make a profit anymore. Companies come and go, industry's moving so fast, data's getting bigger and bigger, customers' attention spans are shorter and shorter. I think 2015 it's 5 seconds, our average attention span. And
3 seconds less than a goldfish.
Which is 3 seconds less than a goldfish, indeed.
I wrote something about that, which is, and I sort of disputed the fact, because I thought, well, that just doesn't make any sense, particularly when you can think about people playing video games for hours and hours and hours, which requires ultimate kind of focus and attention. Yeah. Or that you can watch if you compare it to the length of blockbuster or best-selling kind of movies, they're actually getting longer and longer. Yeah. And so on and so forth. So I'm like going, attention spans getting shorter. I'm like going, is it not that just there's so much more stuff out there, and the 99% of it's just rubbish?
Yeah.
And actually, it's not about our attention span, but it's about our ability to discern what's rubbish and what's good. And therefore, it's all about picking about what we want to focus on.
Yeah. We're going to go off on all sorts of tangents here. I can see we're going to need 2 hours to do this. For me, what it comes down to is profits with purpose. Because people get bored they don't enjoy companies anymore. They're not interested, I don't believe, in the same way that they used to be. And I certainly don't think that customer is as interested in brands as the brands think they are. Now, there's obviously been a shift over the last 10 years that the customer's in control and not the brands.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on. Trust is at the beginning of that. So the best brands are trying to build relationships faster, and they're trying to use technology and stuff to do that, build that trusted relationship and add value. But that all sounds really markety and a little bit kind of, we all say that. But for me, it's like, what's the next step? Because anyone can become successful. I believe that you go from survival to success. And survival is really where you're just a brand fighting for market share. And it's all price and discount. There's no loyalty. People follow you because they have to. They don't really have a choice, you know. Utility, sometimes it's a telco. It might be a supermarket.
Water companies.
Insurance company, water companies, exactly. But there's levels of success that you might go through, and there's different behaviours as you get more and more successful. You start to measure different things. But you're still going to reach a point where you're making a ton of money, everybody likes you, it looks like there's a certain amount of love and customer satisfaction's really high, but then what? So what? You're making a ton of money. What I think is that there's a place for significant brands when it's about more than making money. And this is a trend that I see coming through the valley. Evan Williams, who we both know, founder of Twitter, he launched Obvious Ventures again, December the 8th last year. And he's only investing in companies whose mission is to have a purpose. He calls it profits with a purpose.
Right.
So that's really where my book's going towards. It's like, how do you go beyond making money? How do you actually inspire people? Like Kevin Roberts said years ago, 2003 in Love Marks, how do you have loyalty beyond reason because of what you stand for? Like, why would you inspire an audience that regardless of price, they would always buy from you? And often that comes down to, this is what we stand for, this is what we believe. And my favourite quote from the book is probably Sinek, which I think, yes it is, I did put it on the back. The goal in business is not to sell to people who need what you have, it's to do business with people who believe what you believe.
Yeah.
It's not just about selling more stuff, it's about connecting with people on a spiritual and an emotional level.
So anyway, the thing I was thinking about, Jeremy, based on what you were saying just then, was just sort of two things. One is, that sounds a little bit like a return to sort of the triple bottom line type of thing. And there's a triple bottom line. Yeah, the 3 Ps, is it people, profit, and purpose or something. So it's not just about the money, it's about everything else. And that was something that was a bit like, it's what CSR sort of like agendas back in the day were sort of associated with, and all this sort of like stuff. So that's the first thing. Is it just like a return from that, but coming at it from a slightly different perspective? That's
really interesting as well, though, because the brands that I've chosen to look at in the book, I want to tell stories about the behind the scenes of some of the stuff you don't get to see. Obviously, I'm in marketing, and it would be quite easy to say, Nike did this, they spent a ton of money, amazing stuff happened, and aren't they wonderful? Look at how they launched this new product. Yeah. So everybody does that, and I think whilst that's interesting, that's not what I want to talk about, and that's not what I thought inspired people. So I've looked back at all the brands over the years, and I've gone back to like some of the greatest business decisions that were ever made about when you build a brand that's got a cause, or that's got a founder that's passionate about doing something. So Henry Ford, for example.
Yeah.
Greatest business decision, apparently, voted by Forbes. I went and had a look at that. And when he doubled the workers' wages, you remember back when he was doing the Model T. The Model T is fascinating just because it made the first commercially available car, and it was responsible for essentially the explosion in roadside advertising.
Do you know why he did that?
Why he doubled? I did, because no one turned up to work. There was a third of the workforce that didn't turn up any given day, and
it was about turnover. It was less. Some people have created this kind of urban myth sort of thing that it's about kind of ability to kind of like hire, kind of like, or buy more cars.
No.
But in actual fact, it's about kind of reducing employee turnover.
Yeah.
It's like going, well, if we're going to pay them, if we're going to pay them sort of minimum wage, then we're going to get minimum wage behaviour sort of thing. So.
And he had the moving conveyor belt, which came in for the first time when he wanted to increase production, and it was robots, and it was really monotonous work, so people were getting upset about it. And what was fascinating was that part of his vision wasn't just to pay people more than he thought, pay them absolutely what we can afford, not what we can get away with. But he also thought that, if we're making these cars, people should drive these cars. And I think when they started out, the cost of the car was about $700, which back then was just the moon. And he wanted to make it affordable to the guy on the factory line. And I think in the end it dropped down with, the economies of scale down to like 200.
Right.
And everybody could buy a car with about 2 months' salary. But that opened up this entire thing that even Wall Street didn't agree with at the time. Wall Street Journal slated him. And I think General Motors took about 10 years to decide, and now it's obviously the standard that everybody else has got. Okay. But it's stories like that about why Edison built General Electric, and then what happened with Jack Welch in sort of the 70s and 80s. It's like those stories that return to why some of these great companies were founded. It's the same principles. John Lewis, 160 years, it's exactly the same. Technology's changed, and speed has changed.
So before I forget the my second question, because I'll say something that's like, if you reflect on that and all the history and things and everything else, it's sort of, you could possibly quite easily come to the conclusion that are quite stupid, really.
That we're quite stupid.
Yeah, just generally as a human race.
That we don't learn.
That we don't learn about some of this sort of stuff. We're great at making new stuff. We don't learn some of these kind of lessons because we keep sort of almost like either unlearning them or forgetting them or ignoring them or kind of whatever. Anyway, that's another kind of point.
Hold that thought, because we were talking about this yesterday, and there's the first ever data scientist from Facebook. It's called Jeff Hammerbacher. And he left before the IPO, so he would have stood to have made an absolute fortune. And he was famous for saying, it sucks that the greatest minds of our generation are just trying to figure out how to get people to click more ads. Mm. And he basically went on to have this conversation about how the goal of our generation isn't to advance knowledge, it's to be in the know. We just want to soak up a ton of stuff, but we don't necessarily want to do things, invent things, and innovate. I'm not entirely sure that I agree with that, because I think the way that that technology is kind of making advancements and innovation faster, and anyone can go and build stuff in a way that maybe they didn't have the tools before. But I think it's a really interesting point, that there's a generational thing as well that maybe we're.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think. I don't know. I mean, I'll ponder on that one.
You mentioned attention spans, and we're getting lost in the noise. I'm not sure. I think this generation's an incredible generation. It's getting a bad rep with the attention spans and Tinder, and it's all transactional. And I'm not.
Well, no, but if you speak to a lot of kind of young people, they're either really engaged or not engaged. I mean, in equal kind of measure with the stuff that they care about.
Yeah.
I think that's the point. And I think there's you go back to a point that you made before, is about that, brands think that people kind of care about them more than they actually kind of do, and I think that's kind of true. Most people would call that a bit of a psychosis. If you went and saw if a brand went and saw a doctor, they would tell them that they're mad, and they're slightly delusional, because actually what really matters is how they are with kind of people, and then what people kind of think with them, think about them, and how they engage with them and it's not about what they want people to do; it's what actually people do. I guess that's the point.
And there's definitely a trust issue in the middle of that.
But I think you also said something earlier on about kind of trust, and then talked about relationships and stuff. But again, that's coming at it from a brand's perspective, because you've got to have a relationship before there's trust. You can't start with trust in kind of in mind. It's obviously you have to. That's something you work towards, but you have to start with. Well, actually, let's just be honest with each other and open with each other. Let's have a relationship, and let's be honest about what that relationship is. And was, and also can be.
Yeah, and I think there was some research from Oxford Brookes years ago that was only 14% of people trust brands, but about 78% of people trust their friends. And Zuckerberg came out with a news feed saying it's not important kind of what the news is, it's more important about who you heard the news from. And that was the basis about this is all about your friends and about the building a relationship. Brands have tried to shoehorn their way into the middle of that, and we're kind of in this position where you might take advice from your friend in a pub. On what computer to buy, or kind of what new thing you should do on your Apple, as opposed to, even if he knows a fraction of the guy that sat in the Genius bar in the Apple store, the smartest guy you've possibly got access to, you may still take a recommendation from your brother-in-law who knows a tenth. And it's all about his context, isn't it? It's about what's the basis for that relationship and how much do you trust what that person likes to say. And that's exactly back to your point. This hasn't changed for hundreds and hundreds of years.
And we keep banging our heads against the wall. But anyway, back to the book, and there's sort of this survival, success, and significance and things. Now, the way you were talking about it, about being about founders and so on, is that it makes me think is that I can understand how that would work for a startup and a fast-growing kind of company. It's something that's still been driven and still been led by its founder. But that, for many kind of bigger firms or older sort of firms, that can probably prove more challenging. Or have you got an example from the book?
Yeah, there is an example which we may need to edit.
Okay.
There's an example.
Well, give me two then.
I'll give you a couple. There's definitely an example of Philips. Philips is one of my favourite brands, and it's been and if you look right the way back to where Philips started off with Anton, and the light bulb and the lighting, and there was the whole thing. Everyone thinks Edison invented a light bulb. Obviously, Edison didn't. He just innovated on something that went in to become GE, and then he figured out how to make it long-lasting and took it to market. Philips did something similar. Obviously, the companies have kept a very similar trajectory, but have gone off in slightly different angles. But where I think that the Philips story is very interesting, and it's constantly innovated, but sometimes it's not been reflected in the share price. And if I remember rightly, maybe 30 years ago, Philips was in a pretty bad place, and it was the share price was taking a massive hit. It wasn't bankrupt, but it was going down towards that, not unlike Apple.
Yeah.
3 months before Jobs went back, Apple was almost bankrupt. It had like 3 months worth of runway in cash, and obviously he came and turned it around, and the rest is history with that. But where Philips was looking at this, they were looking at kind of protecting the share price and protecting exactly what is it that we do to make sure that the company doesn't go under. And maybe you put a load of CFOs in charge and they're all trying to protect share price. And if you look back, and I use this example, if you look back the last 14 years of Philips' share price, it's almost flat. So in spite of everything that's happened with social media and everything that's happened with data and web and connected products and stuff, you wouldn't know if you looked at the share price. Whereas you look at someone like GE, that innovate, fail. Yeah. It's like the Facebook move fast and break thing, sort of, their old mentality of that. Philips went through a stage when it didn't seem to have that, and it took a hit. So they've come back, they've looked at exactly what's our purpose, what's our mission. You can read in the news how they're changing their business structure now, and it's going more towards healthcare as opposed to consumables and lighting. And Philips has now got the most incredible vision, which is by 2025 they want to improve the lives of 3 billion people. And they're doing that by doing predictive healthcare. They're doing that by using all the connected products and devices and wearables and healthcare monitors, heart rate monitors, blood transfusion devices, MRI scanners, all of this data into one place. Type your patient record, your hospital record, so your caregiver, your GP, your hospital guy. Everyone sees that in real time, and the idea is to keep people out of hospital as long as possible. But even if you go in hospital, you get the best possible care. And
let me interrupt there, because actually there was I would imagine there's probably a percentage of people that might listen to this that might be kind of slightly cynical and go, but surely all Philips have done and reappraised has gone, which market from now into the kind of the future offers kind of the most potential, as it were, and gone, it's healthcare rather than consumer products, because that's becoming more commoditized, and therefore they're chasing their largest profitability, and what they're doing is they're translating what that means into kind of like affecting the healthcare of people. So before they ask it in their heads, I'm asking you out kind of like loud. It's like, is that true, or is there more to kind of their?
No, and this is obviously this is purely my opinion. This is my take on what I've seen. I don't believe that any of those decisions were financially driven. I don't think they were financially motivated. When they're saying we want to genuinely improve people's lives, and we're going to be able to do that by having technology in place that could predict the likelihood of someone having a heart attack in the next 6 hours.
Right.
So it can send an alert directly to a relative, to a GP, to a caregiver, to a nurse.
Right.
Because people want to get served at home. They don't want to go in hospital. They want to have the best healthcare at home. Whatever the state of their health is, whether it's diabetes, whether it's Alzheimer's, whatever the thing is that they struggle with. And the way that they talk, there's a guy called Haroon Tas that's their CIO, and he's really driving this forward. And I think the vision of what they've done is stunning. And it's all about enabling people internally to try and figure out that this is the vision of Philips. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to stand for. This is how we want to improve people's lives. If you're on board, they've got these programs called Digital at Scale to try and enable the guys. Like, this is how we're going to push forward. It's not, we want market share in this to get more light bulbs to go off and do a thing and make some more profits. I believe it's a great example of a company with profits, with purpose.
Okay.
And again, this is why the book is so much fun to write, because it opens up a debate on, really? Like the great example would be...
The greatest kind of the greatest challenge over the 21st century, particularly for the Western kind of like
we're
world,
cynical, man.
It's healthcare.
Exactly, yeah. And you look at...
If not just the Western world, but the whole world is healthcare.
Well, let me turn it around. Let's look at Facebook, and one of the potentially most commercially driven brands in the world. I make a case in the book that of all the offers that Mark Zuckerberg turned down, which were obscenely big offers when he was a very young student. Even when Facebook started out, it wasn't even his favourite project. He was building a photo sharing app. And he turned that down because he had a bigger vision, and he's kept turning the money down. Obviously it's IPO'd, but he's still in control. Now, internet.org, which is an extension, it's essentially driven by Facebook, right, to connect either 2/3 of the world, 4.5 billion people or whatever it is. It makes no commercial sense for Facebook to do that. There's no advertising market there. People haven't got data plans. They're not going to be clicking on ads. They're not going to make money to do that. The cynical person would say, well, that's a long-term view that he's got, because once that 2/3 of the world is connected,
Facebook consumers,
and they're going to make a ton of money, and that's where the explosion is going to come from. Where, if Wall Street's looking at that, that's like, no, you squeeze as much money as you can out of the third that's already connected, because that's where the money's coming from. The fact that he's got such a long-term view driven by this desire just to make the world more open and connected, and more good things are going to happen when a guy, in the middle of nowhere can see the stock price of a commodity that he's traded in Maize or whatever, 50 yards down the road.
Yeah.
He can now double his income, make more money, send his children to school, and they can get better education. People have got access to Wikipedia where previously they couldn't afford books. Now they can get Wikipedia, they can get an education and get qualified. In areas where previously, if they didn't have internet, that wouldn't have happened. And floating drones and all this kind of stuff to connect the world makes amazing sense to do that. So I think it's this dichotomy, isn't it? It's a beautiful story. It's very inspirational. It's definitely adding value to all these people that just didn't have the internet before, didn't even know why they needed it. They're going to make money in the future. Of course they are. It's a commercial brand, and this is the beauty of the book. This isn't non-profit. This isn't charity. I'm not trying to say this is about going and giving all your money to the RSPCA, and that's not what it's about. It's about these brands want to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. No. But you need to make that profit with a purpose, and I think it's more inspirational when you've got an internet.org style story driving Facebook, and not like Jeff Hammerbacher was thinking, we just want to get people to click more ads.
Right.
And that's the conversation I'd love to have.
I think it's also the other interesting distinction you've got to make is that, to quote, I think it's Abraham Lincoln, is you don't have to please all of the people all of the time. And significance, it doesn't mean significant to everybody, it means significant to some.
Exactly. And one of my friends, Minter Dial, challenged me on this the other day, because I was talking about how you've got, and this again, it's everyone's going to have a different view. I'm bucketing these brands and saying some brands are in survival mode, some are very successful, there's varying degrees of success, and I explain the levels of success and what the different behaviours are in each channel. But for me to say one brand is successful and another brand is significant, for the next guy, that brand's not significant, it may be successful. But to you, that brand might be completely irrelevant. And that was the bit. It's like one person's significant brand is another person's completely irrelevant brand.
But also I think the survival, success and significance, I mean, it's not just about connecting with like people, because it's like, it's getting like your audiences, your consumers, whatever. But it's also relative to size as well. I mean, you don't actually have to be a brand and a mega brand and all this sort of, to have this sort of significance or success. Yeah. It could be your local shop owner or your market sole trader or local carpenter or joiner or whatever, because they're just doing something that has significance about it, and I guess there's purpose about it.
It is, and I think it's something that speaks to exactly where the industry is right now as well. It's a challenge that I see all the time. It's certainly one of the most talked about topics when we go and speak at conferences, which is that you may have the biggest brands in the world. You've got McDonald's and Sony PlayStation that each serve about 120 million customers a day.
Yeah.
But essentially what they're trying to do is to figure out how to be a very big brand that acts like a small brand. The reason that technologies exist, and certainly technologies with the company that I work for, it's how do you enable a big brand to act like a small brand? If you want to personalise that message so much, it's not the one-to-many, it's the many one-to-one relationships, right? It's how do we get a big brand to act like the corner shopkeeper? When you used to walk in that store and he knew exactly what you wanted to buy, he knew what else you might want to buy, but he's not going to talk to you about that. He's not going to beat you around the head with buy this stuff. He's going to ask you about your holiday and your dog and how's your family and how's your Auntie Ethel and that thing that you did last week, did your team do? And you've got the relationship that's being built whilst there's personalisations there for the stuff that you're going to buy. Brands don't act like that enough. It's like they should act like the shopkeeper.
I guess the next question would be, they might not act like that enough, but then the next question would be, because they're so big and they've got relationships or even just transactional relationships with so many people, I guess the question would be, can they actually have this relationship?
Of course they can.
Well, maybe, I mean, no, that's just the kind of question. It's a discussion. Well, can they have that meaningful relationship in a way that you can have that you can have with your local kind of like shopkeeper, or is there again another kind of level of sort of delusion kind of there, and then actually that's not one, it's not possible, and two, people aren't interested in it. And I'm just being
be devil's advocate, because this
challenging.
It is possible, and people are doing it. And there's one of my favourite examples would probably be, it's not, there's a tiny little bit in the book about it, but it speaks to Live Nation.
Right.
So Live Nation, you can search out some of the stuff that they're doing in marketing on YouTube, but they can track up to 4,000 attributes of their customers. Mm-hmm. So they know up to 4,000 things about them, which raises a whole load of questions about what's the value exchange and privacy and all of that sort of stuff. There's such a strong value exchange with the information that Live Nation have got that, and obviously Live Nation's the ticket database when you go and buy your favourite concert, you want to go and see Beyonce or whatever.
You saying I'm a Beyonce fan?
You look like you would be a Beyonce fan. You a deadhead?
I am now not going to swear on my own podcast.
I'm sorry, I meant
Really?
Katy Perry. So when you decide that you're going to go to your Katy Perry concert with your pink wig, you're going to download the app, and you might want to figure out your traffic updates.
More likely bad religion.
They know so much about their customers, but give so much in return.
Right.
Whether that's merchandise, whether that's recommending other venues, whether that's feeding information to the artist about your favourite playlist they should play in this city and not that city, whether it's to a concert promoter to be able to sell, don't go to that venue, go to this venue, don't play in that city, play in the other city. When you're the person that's going, having signed up and liked them on Facebook or downloaded the app, you know exactly where your favourite concession stall is at the venue. You've got the best traffic update to get home. You've got the best merchandise based upon all the stuff that you love. And it's a very, very highly personalised relationship that you can have when you know that many things about a customer.
Personalised.
It's completely personalised.
It's customised.
It's personalised. Now the thing is, this is where the brands have to do their jobs.
There's a person in that kind of word, rather than it's
But isn't this the difference between a good brand and a bad brand? It's like saying good profits and bad profits. Just having the profits and making the money is one thing, but is that a relationship? There's
I respect that. I respect.
It's up to the brand to have the right tone of voice to make that a relational conversation.
I respect the idea and the craft and the care that goes into kind of making kind of those things. I get that. I'm just being sort of devil's advocate, and I'll also be slightly pedantic when it's like when people talk about personalisation. I'm like, there's no person in personalisation. There's customization for the individual.
But I think that also speaks to what level that brand is at. So if you've got that level of personalisation available to you, say you go out and buy technology that can enable you to do that. If you're a brand, for example, that may be on a survival mode, let's try and break it down into this. I haven't thought about it like this, but it might work. Say you're a telco, and you follow them because you have to. You have a bad relationship. Your signal's constantly breaking down. It's not what it should be. Your friend next door's got strong, all the rest of it, and you have to have this relationship. You don't really want it, but you've kind of got to. They've got access to all the personalisation about you. They know all of the attributes and your billing, your usage. But because of the type of transactional relationship they have with you, there's going to be a certain way that they talk to you. Whether that's customer service channel, video chat, whether that's on Twitter, it doesn't matter. There's going to be a certain very transactional view. Now, if you look at, say, some of the most successful telcos, say you looked at O2, who have got incredible customer service and are almost to the point of being obsessed with their customers. They've got exactly the same level of information.
You check out the interview I did with the guy who runs Consumer Cellular in the States.
Yeah.
Because they've abandoned contracts.
Is that right? I like the idea of that.
Because they say it's all about the relationship.
And it's almost like we've got all this information and it's wonderful and it allows us to do beautiful things, but we're going to be, I think Avinash said this, you're going to be defined by what you do with that information. So a brand that's fighting for survival is going to do one thing and have a certain conversation with you, and it's going to be very quickly, how can we get you off the phone as quick as possible and don't churn, don't go somewhere else. Whereas somebody like O2 would be, and what else can we do? And what else can we do? And so that is personalisation, right? But it would be customization maybe at the bottom level.
Right.
It's more of a relationship at the top. But once you get to O2, that's still very successful. You're still very loyal. You're still probably not going to churn. You might even tell your friends in a pub when they need a new phone, make sure you get on the O2 network. But then what? Is there a way that O2 can then use all the profits they've got with Telefonica to go and stand for something much bigger? Like, should they be connecting the rest of the world and working with Internet.org, for example? And it's like, do amazing things, absolutely max out the level of success and performance that you've got, make money, increase customer satisfaction, but where next? And I don't think we have the conversations about being successful, and we all debate how brands should do that and what technologies and strategies you should put in place. I don't think we have enough of a conversation about what goes beyond. Let me give you a really quick example. Of all the money that's given in the world to social enterprises, and this covers, philanthropy and all that kind of stuff, and foundations, only 5% of it is given by companies. Of all the money that's given, so charitably, non-profits, given away to causes, only 5% is given away by companies. And of all the money that's given away by companies, approximately 80% of that it is claimed that is given away for tax reasons. So you've got this tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of corporate giving through a foundation or a CSR policy where they genuinely want to do good. They genuinely want value to people's lives in some way by having cause, belief, mission, etc. And that's...
So this is a very, 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 very thin end.
Exactly,
wedge.
and I find that is so small. I wish that we had more conversations about how to make that wedge a bit bigger, because the brands have got the money. And even Mark Benioff was talking the other day about, we might even be in a bubble. And the reason why people should invest in models like the 111, or you're giving away whatever percentage of product equity and time, is that if that bubble bursts and if all these tech valuations fall over, we need to put the processes in place.
We've done something.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like that. It's like, you guys, but do something with it now. Don't wait until you've got the money to give it away. Charles, who set up donors.org, he said if you give away $1, you're a philanthropist. It's like, we don't have that attitude enough. Churches try and talk like that, but they don't have the beans. Brands do, but we should have a culture of giving to something bigger, not just because it's a nice thing to do, but because standing for something is also going to help you be more successful.
Brilliant. So actually, that's brilliant. I'm thinking about your time, and I'm thinking about, time is just sort of general.
Can I share my favourite statistic with you? You just reminded me, and you can cut this out later on if you like.
If it's your favourite statistic, I'm never going to cut it out, so go and crack on.
Brilliant documentary, recommend everyone to watch. It's incredibly geeky. It's German with English subtitles. You can get it on Netflix and iTunes. Master of the Universe, and it's about the banking crisis.
Okay.
And I'm fascinated by it because I think the tech industry is in danger of going the same way as the banks did, with some kind of economic crisis around ethics and morals about the way they're handling data and stuff. And there's a stat that the film opens with, the documentary, and it says that 20 years ago, in 1995, I think the internet will have been, 6 years old, maybe 5, 6 years old. 20 years ago, the average amount of time that people held shares in a company was 4 years. Mm-hmm. And in 2015, it's 22 seconds. And that includes high-frequency trading and all that kind of stuff. But that's not the bit that's interesting. The bit that I find most interesting is if you consider a share as an interest in a company, people aren't interested in companies very long anymore. And once you start having that conversation about, now that's the world we're playing in, as a brand, how can I possibly build a relationship of any value that's built on any kind of trust, where people aren't investing in companies very long? We know attention spans are 5 seconds. We know they don't trust their...
I was just thinking about that. Actually, that kind of brings us full circle.
Yep.
Is that, and that whole idea is that our attention span's 5 seconds, or is it that we're just filtering out all the crap?
I think the trigger is 5 seconds. I mean, and we gloss over this too much, so actually you're really good to pick up on that. Because it's like you look at the big manifestos. I believe this came from... It was highlighted in Obama when he first ran in 2008, and I think Hillary Clinton's going to do it now. She has the big manifesto, and she has all of the things that she wants to stand for. Whether you agree with them or not doesn't matter. The point is that she has to get some of those sound bites over in 5 seconds to get your attention. But if she says that in the right way, by understanding exactly what the customers want to hear, where they want to hear it, and on what channel, then I'm interested. I'm going to read all day long about everything she wants to talk about. But the key is, how do you break down a huge message into 5 seconds chunks? And Kevin Spacey said this the other day. I watched the thing with him on YouTube, and he said, you know what, no matter what our job title is, our only objective is telling better stories. Mm-hmm. That's it. Absolutely. We tell better stories, and our job is to tell those stories as fast and as compelling as possible.
Well then, I agree with all that, and I would share the final sort of quote with you, which I love. It's one of my favourite ones. I'm a bit of a quote meister, and it's this. And it's been attributed to also different people, every from Mark Twain to Blaise Pascal. And I think Blaise Pascal is actually the original one. It says, like, "Forgive me for writing a long letter because I didn't have time to write a short one."
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. It's almost a bit like stepping off the conveyor belt. Things might be fast, but sometimes you need to kind of take a bit more time to be able to cut through the sort of signal to noise ratio. And I think that's the kind of point. But anyway, before we kind of get stuck into it, and we missed lunch, and you missed your phone call, and I missed my next meeting and things. What's the plan for the book? When's it out? Where people get it? Proceeds of the books are also going somewhere kind of like quite cool.
This is quite nice. It's not a huge promotional thing. I'm not trying to be a big best-selling author. I just wanted to write some good stories that I thought were interesting. 100% of the profits of the book are going to code.org. So for every book that's sold, 5 kids get an hour of coding.
Nice.
An hour of training. So there's some kind of purpose behind what it is I'm trying to do. The book should be available this weekend, which should be the 26th. So there's going to be a link on my Twitter, and we can be able to share that.
I'll link it all up. Yeah.
It's going to be available in hardback and softback, and there's probably going to be about 6 weeks before the ebook is available. It's about 400 pages, and the plan is...
Is it going to be available on Amazon and...
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, W.H. Smith, Waterstones.
The whole shooting
There'll
match.
be a link through Lulu, and it's self-published.
Okay.
Just because I just wanted to prove that anyone can write a book.
And you can also generate more receipts, and more receipts go to...
More money to give away. Less money
to
to publishers and agents.
Nice. And then is there a book website?
There is not. Everything's going to go... It's probably going to go through Tumblr.
Okay. That's fine.
Again, just to try and make it... I wanted to make it as accessible as possible. I would love someone to read the book and think, you know what, I could do that. So I'm going to figure out the stuff that's in my head. I'm going to put that down and do that as well. I'll buy my ISBN number for a couple of £100 done. So it'd be nice if it inspired some people to write some stuff too, because it's hard work. It's been a labour of love, but it's been painful, banging your head against a wall, but one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
Jeremy, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.